Hi guys, a very good evening, everyone. Welcome to ninth webisode. And today, on how to validate the business idea. I've got an expert. His name is Vatsal Kanakiya, and he's a BTech student. BTech computer science graduate from University of Mumbai, and he has invested in multiple companies. Some of the companies like Aurora Quantum, Miraculous, Heart Aerospace, Toybots Labs, and he's also partner of Mehta Ventures family office. And currently, he is serving as CTO of 100x VC, which is early stage venture capital firm. India's first early stage venture capital firm, and we're all very much. It's our pleasure to host you, Vatsal, and thank you for accepting a request once again.
Thank you, Pawan, for the wonderful introduction. Really appreciate it. Glad to hear I have a huge audience in front of me. I wish I'd be able to see them because I have some jokes in between and I really want to know if they land or not. Uh, but regardless, happy to join you and, share what I know, and happy to answer any questions the students might have.
Definitely. So what we will do is first 45 minutes, we can, you can give the session to them on how to validate a business idea. And in between also, you can have a lot of queries. So I'm also, I'll also take the queries that are being posted on Facebook and over the Zoom. I think the people are, joining slowly. Already the students have ideas. So the students who are joining over Zoom, they already have ideas. They are part of our school, our entrepreneurship school. So they'll keep posting the questions. So guys, any questions that you have, you can post the questions right from the beginning, so that in between, Vatsal can take, your questions, and then, he can give his insights also to your questions. Uh, Yes. So, okay, before we join the session, Vatsal, so what made you to, become an investor, or, what do you, I'm sure, on a day-to-day basis, you receive a lot of pitch decks from the people, you receive a lot of proposals from the people. So what is the first thing that you see in any of the presentations or any of the founders that are approaching you?
The first thing I see is the background of the founders themselves. At the stage we invest, which is, we're typically the first check investors into a company. So we are usually the first people to ever see that business plan. So you are typically at this stage working more with the founders. The idea is flexible. The founders may change what they're building, the solution, the problem, the customers, everything can change. It's the founders that don't change in the company in the end. So the first thing I typically take a look at is who the founders are. Are they really dedicated to their business? Is this something they're potentially experts at? What gives them the right to build this business or to win, right? And what's driving them to actually want to build this particular solution and try to solve this particular problem? So that is kind of the first thing I see, right? And the reason I got into investing is precisely this, where at an early stage you are working so much with people, and this is an opportunity to work with not just one company but tens of 20s of companies, and we are very active investors in that sense, where we work closely with the entrepreneurs we invest in to help them refine the pitch, business model, go to market, help them scale up, get them the right clients, partners, connects they might require, right? So it's a fairly active role that we play as investors, which is what is exciting about being an early stage investor. So I mean, why it's like, when people ask you why do you read books, it's like, why live one life when you can live 50 from books, right? It's the same story here. Why build one company when you can build 50 together? So yeah.
Yes. So, Vatsal, I think you can share your screen also if at all there is any presentation, to showcase our students. We can do that. Yes.
Sure. Let me just try to share.
So like I promised in the last session, guys. So if at all you anyone who wants to pitch in your ideas to Vatsal in the last 15 minutes or 5 minutes, you
I'll
can.
just join in a second.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Yeah. So guys, I mean, this is a very good opportunity for you all. People who wants to pitch in your ideas. Last 5 minutes, just raise your hands. We will make sure that Vatsal is the right person to give insights about your idea, and we will give opportunity for few of the ideas to present in the end. And yeah, so Vatsal is back.
Great.
Yes.
Sorry, I was muted for a bit there. Awesome. So I'm going to start off. If you have any questions, feel free to share through comments if you're on Facebook and through the chat on Zoom. Happy to take them up. And Pawan, if you think it's a good question and relevant to where I am in my presentation, feel free to interject and I'll take it up in between as well. Open to that. Uh, it's a free conversation, so whenever you're ready. Anyway, let's kind of start off with my presentation. So we'll be talking about validating your business idea. Thank you everybody again for having me. Basic thing we're going to be talking about is, as an entrepreneur, how to know that the problem you're trying to solve is worth solving and that the solution you're building is worth spending time on, right? Um, so let's start with the adage that everybody must have heard: an idea is nothing without execution, right? Uh, the ideas are a dime a dozen. You typically think about like hundreds of ideas every day, especially as kids. You're like, "Arey, aaj school mein ye kyun padhaya? Let me just kind of change this. Let me try something else. Can I just skip school today? Why do I have to do online lectures? Maybe there's a way to do this on VR, whatever, right? So there's tons of ideas you might go through, but execution is something completely else, right? So it's important to remember that every idea, which you're trying to validate, you have to match it with execution. And so from that, let me kind of move into the structure of the session, right? um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide you through the few steps that you might go through to validate your idea, and then post that a few nuances into each part of it, right? Um, so this is where you begin. You have an idea. You want to build a Chinese food brand because you find Mumbai mein Chinese food acha nahi milta hai. Or you find, well, Italian food's not easy to find in Mumbai. Or you're building a software company. You think uh, the current social networking companies are not good enough. You think there should be better alternatives which are not as toxic, right? Whatever it is, you have an idea, right? So what is an idea and how do you frame it internally? Because typically these ideas tend to be just a garbled set of images and thoughts and words and noises in your head. But you need to make it concise, right? You need to be able to present it to yourself in a concise, straightforward manner where so you can also tell it to others, right? So that's where this comes into place. In an idea, what you're looking for is you want to be able to say, I am building X for Y who face the problem Z very frequently, and this makes their life A% better, right? So, what are you trying to answer through this one statement? What is the problem? Who has it? How important is the problem, right? How am I solving it? What is my solution? And how much better is my solution than what already exists? This one statement, right, of phrasing your idea makes it clear to you and to anybody else who you might convey it to, right? So this is how I recommend people to kind of frame what they're thinking about. I am building X, which is my solution, for Y, who is my customer, who faces the problem Z, which is the problem very frequently, which is how important that problem is. And this makes their life A% better. which basically tells me that this solution is better than what exists by 8%, right? So you have an idea, and then you try your best to form a concise statement like this around that. But just forming a statement doesn't help me understand if that idea is worth spending time upon, right? So how do I go about understanding more? So that's where you build your idea. What do you mean by you build your idea? You build an MVP, which is the lazy but smart way to do entrepreneurship, right? MVP is a minimum viable product. What is the crux of the problem is what you're finding in an MVP. What is the minimum set of features that can help you validate the problem at hand? And what is the work, the product that is most worth my time? So let me give an example here. Let's say you are building uh, a website where anybody who wants to get somebody else to do your homework can just come on, upload their homework, and then somebody just does it and you pay them a sum, right? Now, you could build the whole platform at once, or what you could do is just build a website, a very simple website, and just put it online, say solvemyhomework.com, and don't keep anything at the backend, and just keep a form saying, this is what my product does, sign up for early access. This is your MVP. It's the minimum viable product at this point in time, which will allow you to validate if people actually want this product or not. So what you do is you look if are people actually coming to the website and signing up for access. If they are, then that tells you, yes, this is a problem that people are facing. This is worth my time. So your MVP doesn't necessarily have to be a complete product. It can be that as well. For example, with WhatsApp, their MVP, their early version of the product was just you log in with your phone number and you can chat with anybody else whose contact you've stored. The DP part, your WhatsApp status is about us, WhatsApp calling, WhatsApp video are all extra features that were added later on, right? But in the beginning, none of that was there. What was the minimum product they required? The minimum set of features was the ability to create an account, which happened through their phone number, and the ability to chat with anybody else whose number you had. So that is what an MVP is. So the best way to validate your idea is to build the minimum version of the product, which will help you start collecting data. What do you mean by data? Now, before that, let's talk about how you can gather this data, right? So that you have to do by selling your product. How do you do that? This is called traction, right? Traction is the word people use when they say, I have some people who are using my product, or I have made progress with potential customers, right? Wait, are people actually paying me money to buy my product and to use it? That's what you're trying to understand. So when you're trying to sell your product, for example, let's say it's the website we discussed earlier, which is the student homework one, right? You have to find out who is this problem the most important to. So in as per my hypothesis, I have figured that I am building this web portal for 8th grade, 10th grade students who have double homework from classes and from school, right? So they have lot of things going on. So this is the most important problem from 10th grade students. Now, how do I get to them in the cheapest way possible? Well, one way to do it is most of these people are very frequent on Instagram or Facebook. Many are part of Facebook tuition groups or something, or doubt solving groups. Perhaps what I can do is the cheapest and fastest way is I just post this link on that Facebook group. This is called distribution. Distribution is how you get your product to your potential customers. While there are a lot of channels for distribution, and for most products, There are paid channels like Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, etc. The cheaper your distribution is, the better it is for you, because you can gain more customers with less effort, and you can run experiments faster. So let's say, again, my idea, which is studenthomework.com. It is most important problem for 10th grade students, right? So now how do I get to them? I go to these doubt solving groups which their classes have created. I get in and I post there that, hey, if you have trouble with your homework, come to this site. How do I convince them to pay, use my product? That's where I say, on my website, I write down how I can help them in solving their problem. What I write down and how I describe my product to them will help me convince them to pay or use my product. That is where they might sign up, right? So that is how that would work pertaining to the current product. So this gives you traction, which is, I have 100 signups now, or I have 500 signups now, or even 10 signups or 50 signups. But that is something that is showing that you have made some progress with customers. This tells you that customers actually want this product. I will gather customer data. So coming back to data, I am going to sell all the data I've collected to the FBI, and I'm going to make a lot of money, and then I'll get a green card and I'll move to the US and live in the Bahamas, right? No, that's actually not what I mean by this. I wish I had a live audience. This joke, I would have felt much better making it, but I hope you guys are laughing. Basically, what I'm going to do is I will gather customer data and I'll draw insights from it. What that means is, for example, data shows the behavior of each customer. So as an example, in the current example of studenthomework.com, what I might want to understand is, how many people am I converting? Which means, how many people who actually view my posts on Facebook go to the website, and how many people who go to the website actually sign up for my MVP, right? Remember, until now, I've not built anything except a small website. But here's what is happening. Let's say on the Facebook post, I know I have 1500 views. On the website, I have 150 viewers. That means 10% of the viewers of my Facebook post actually came onto my website. But I have only one sign up from those 150 visits. What does that tell me? It tells me not, this is not as important a problem as I might think. Or perhaps this is the way I'm selling it to them is not good, right? So these are insights that you draw from the data you capture, right? So to give an example again, let's say Facebook, before they added the react buttons, right? With the heart and the laughter and stuff, they had only a like button. Somebody in the team decided, we want to expand to more reactions, right? So they must have said, how do we know that this is something our customers want? So what they would do is they would go on the site, they would build this, and then they would do a split test, which is where I would give 50% of my users the standard like format, and 50% of the users the react format, right? Now, from this, what would I hope to learn as a Facebook developer? I would hope to learn, is my changing the product by adding those reacts, right? Is it improving the engagement of people? Is it incentivizing people to like or laugh or love or, whatever, react more often? If yes, then that tells me that this is a success, right? If no, then that tells me this particular experiment doesn't work. So your data allows you to understand what sort of behavior your customers have with the product. Are they engaging? Are they staying on the product as much as you want them to? Are they, of the many that come to your product, how many actually convert into buying it, right? Of the people using it, how many are really satisfied with the product? Those are more data points that you can gather, right? But again, coming to our current product, while we've only built a website, what we've learned is my MVP is the website. Using the distribution of Facebook, I have gained some traction. From the data of the traction, what I'm learning is that my conversion isn't as high as I would hope it would be. So basically, while I had hoped that out of 1500, at least 50 people would convert into the early access, it's not happened. So then I create new experiments. I hypothesize. I say, perhaps I should change the problem. Perhaps the problem isn't homework. Perhaps the problem is time management. Maybe I should try building something that would help students manage their time better, spend less time on their phone, spend less time with their friends. Maybe I want to help them prioritize which homework to work on first, right? That is one thing I can do. Maybe the target market is wrong. The people I think would have this problem don't actually have this. Maybe this is more of a college level problem or a 12th standard problem or a 5th standard problem. Maybe this is something that employees face, in fact, where employees of companies who have too many things to do or too much reporting, they need some sort of service, right? That is one way where you can change the customer himself or herself. And the other way is perhaps I can solve it in a better way. Perhaps the solution I've currently described isn't important enough or good enough to what they're thinking. Perhaps my current solution, while it says, well, I'll connect you to somebody who, uh, will help you do your homework. Perhaps what they want is not somebody who can do my homework itself, but I want a separate tutor itself. Or I want not just ke homework karke do, but homework karke verify karo that the answers are right and then give it back to me, right? So those are three ways you can change your hypothesis. The statement remains the same. I am building X for Y, face the problem Z very frequently, and this makes their life A% better. What can I change? I can change the problem. I can change the person, the customer, or I can change the solution, right? Um, let's move on. So what I do after this is I build my idea again and again and again. So let's say in my next hypothesis, I chose to build a solution where not only do you get the homework done by somebody else, but it is also verified by AI. And so you know that the quality of the homework is always right, right? And then I go through this whole loop again, where I hypothesize this, I build it, I just change my website to reflect the new product that I'm trying to give. And then I post it again. I try to gain traction. From that traction, I gather data, right? This time I see, oh, my engagement has actually improved. Of the 1500 people who were viewing my post, 1000 people came to my website and 300 signed up, which is awesome. That tells you, okay, you're on to something. So now you build the next step of the product. You say, I want to build this product now. What is the minimum set of features that I need to build now to get more data? So let's say for the next minimum step of features, you decide to build a simple web portal where you just submit your homework. That's it. On the other hand, what you manually do is you reach out to people who can help with homework and start sending this homework to them manually, verifying it and sending it back. You build this whole process, and again you get into the cycle of try to get more data, try to get traction. So of the 300 you've got on your access list, you call on 10 people and ask them to submit data. You actually run the whole product cycle with them and submit it back to them. And once they've used it, gather data and feedback from them, which tells you, okay, this seems to be working. Let me try to build more of this product. So that is how you can potentially build and validate an idea together. You start with an idea, you build the minimal version of the product, which will help you gain some insights into what the customer needs. And if this is worth your time on, you use those insights to create new experiments. Using those experiments, you change your product, your solution, or the person you're trying to target. With this new hypothesis, with this new idea, you build again, and so on and so forth. And with this cycle, what you do is you form a lean cycle internally, where you are only working on what is most important to founders. It is important to remember the greatest waste that happens in the entrepreneurial ecosystem is building something that nobody wants, right? So if you build for 2 years something awesome, right? Let's say, for example, a tool which helps students, um, you know, stay up all night and only keep studying, and it doesn't let them sleep. I mean, that's a great tool, but do students actually not want to sleep and study? Or, I mean, I don't think so, right? So that's the way it is, right? So what this cycle of validation allows you to do is to make sure you don't build anything before you know potentially this could work. So you try to form small experiments and then keep validating those experiments. This is very much a science, right? Now going ahead to talk a little bit more about the customer development cycle, right? We talked about how to gain traction. So we'll talk a little bit deeper on how to actually kind of gain insights from customers. So first part of it is, if you do not know who the customer is, then you do not know what good quality is. It is important to remember, and that is why in the first statement itself, when you're defining the idea, you have to be very clear who the customer is. And it is important that when you're in a startup, you are focusing on the niche, very niche customers initially, and then you expand as you grow. The reason being simple. Let's assume let's take the case of Swiggy, right? For Swiggy, their initial proposition was only food delivery, right? And so they started off from a small area in Bangalore, Koramangala, HSR. These are small districts of Bangalore, right? When they started off small, they executed very well, right? By building in that small area, they spent very few resources, their time, their money, others' money, right? All of that with very little, they executed in a small area and validated their experiment. Once they executed there, they said, okay, let me try to validate this on a larger scale. So they raised funds from VCs and executed in Bangalore, where they covered all of Bangalore. Once they replicated that success that they did in one small district of Bangalore across the city, right? Then they said, okay, this is something I can replicate across a few more cities. So then they tried Delhi, Bombay, and a few more top cities, and so on and so forth, until they expanded to the whole of the country, and then into other spaces like Swiggy stores. So coming back again, having a niche customer focus is very important, because you do not want to be everything for everyone. You can be one thing for one person and do it really, really well. And if you do it really well, they will stick with you. And that stickiness makes a big difference. These customers would then refer you to other people who might have the same problem, right? These customers would be willing to pay you much more often, and so on. So you have to be able to know who the customer is. So coming back to my startup, remember that I didn't define my customer as just students in general. I said students of 10th grade. And I could cut it down further for my initial experiments where I say students of 10th grade from Mumbai who are from ICSC or SSC, who I know have a lot of classes and do not have time to work on that homework. Because these are the people for whom I would presume this problem is the most important. And hence, by spending my time on just them, I'm not wasting my time trying to collect data from everybody and anybody. My focus is niche. My ability to reach to these customers become better, right? So find the kind of customer, like I said, who for whom the problem is high frequency and high intensity. It is a very important problem for me, and it comes up very often. Let's say you're building for somebody who wants to buy a car. That is maybe a high intensity problem that, oh, I don't know what car to buy. But is it a high frequency problem? Not so much. I might buy a car once every 10 years or, even longer or shorter. It's not a high frequency problem. Whereas, let's say I'm building something for Zoom calls. Now, you as students are getting on Zoom calls every day. I'm getting on Zoom calls every day. So this is something that is high frequency for a lot of people today. And for the people who are actually trying to maybe make sales on Zoom, is also high intensity. So building products that make my Zoom experience better is a good product, and then you target it to people for whom it is high frequency and high intensity. Important to remember, just like there are good customers and the right customers, there are also bad customers. There will be some people who will try to game the system. Coming back to the student part of it, they might go through the whole process and then say, well, your quality of homework wasn't good, so I'm not going to pay you. Or they keep coming and asking for discounts and asking to get more and more work done, but every time they cop off saying, I don't want to pay you, or just wasting your time. Sometimes these customers deliberately want to give you bad feedback, or they just do not have enough insights to actually guide you on the right road. So you need to know whose feedback you need to take when validating the idea. Let me give another example. Let's say there is a problem that you're solving for parents of the world, right? Let's say parents are scared that their kids, you, are not playing enough, right? So your solution is fine. I'll create an app which reminds your children to go outside and play in the evening at 5 p.m. Now, your mom and dad would probably be very bad customers for this. The reason being, there's something called as mom test, right? Typically, your parents would not be able to be as honest to you about your idea as a real customer would be, right? So just as this is an example of a bad customer. Now, of course, there's no malice from your parents, but the idea is they would not be the right customers, right? You would really have to check with people, with parents who do not have an obligation to give you the answers you want to hear, but the answers you need to hear, right? The data you need to hear, not the ones you want to hear. So you need to be able to get rid of the bad customers. So when you're gaining customer feedback, it is important to remember you need to collect data and not features, right? Coming back to my product, you need to understand, what did you think about the quality of the uh, homework? You don't need to ask them, how could I improve the quality of the homework? Customers know what is good or bad, but typically your customer will not know what is the right way to change it. That is why you're here as an entrepreneur. You build the ideas, you bring the experiments and try them out. And you create something new, customers will not be able to tell you that this is a feature that matters, at least at the early stages for sure. Maybe later on when you've got hundreds of engineers in your team and you've got all the time in the world to build whatever and you're not scared of losing customers, you can take customer feedback and actually build. But until that scale, always take data and not features. So my questions, for example, would be in terms of the studenthomework.com, uh, what did you think was the quality of the homework I gave it to you? What did you think about the turnaround time? Was it okay that I gave you back your homework in 5 hours, right? How was it fast enough for you? That is data for me. Then how to make it faster is something I should be able to decide, right? So gain data, gain more numeric data, and you draw the insights from that. Coming back to the iteration, right? You use this user feedback then to generate insights, to iterate on the product, and then to keep testing it again and again. Now there's a difference between a pivot and an iteration, right? These are new terms. We've had this is the first time I'm introducing this, but here's the basic idea. When you're iterating, you're only changing the solution, the person you're targeting, and the problem you're choosing is typically the same, or your problem might change a little, but your customer is the same, right? So for example, in terms of the the studenthomework.com, like I said, initially I started with, I will only give you homework. Then as an iteration, I made the solution. I will give you homework and validate it and make sure it's correct before handing it over to you. That's an iteration. A pivot is larger, where you're completely changing the product, the problem you're facing, or you're completely changing the customer. If I pivot from selling this solution to from students to teachers, then that's a pivot. If I change from solving homework problems for students to solving time management problems for students, that's also a pivot, right? So a pivot is typically more serious. It's a more serious change in the business, right? And iteration is a smaller change where you're changing the solution, making experiments, figuring out, you know that the problem is there. You realize that the customer is kind of correct, but you're just not finding the right solution. So it is important to know when to iterate and when to pivot. You can't constantly keep iterating, because then you might never actually realize if maybe the issue is with the problem or with the customer. Similarly, you can't always keep on pivoting, because if you do so, you will actually never know, okay, if you've actually found the right customer and the right problem, then your solution just needs some tweaking, right? So the idea is to find a healthy mix of iteration and pivot. It is important to ask the right questions when you're collecting data to validate your idea, right? Like I said earlier, you can't ask for features. And leading questions, for example, would you use a product that solves your homework questions and gives it back to you? That's a poor question, because it's a leading question. These are the kinds of surveys, I'm sure all of you have seen these surveys, and maybe some of you have taken them out as well on Google Forms, right? Where you send out these forms, would you be open to using this, etc., etc., etc. I mean, how many times have you been honest on survey and then actually bought that product? There's a difference between what you're willing to do for a survey and what you're actually going to pay money for, right? Why do I say this? One thing to remember is, while we see a lot of these businesses coming around that you think are fancy and which grow without making money for years, right? And then you think, oh, this is how you build businesses, right? You don't make money and you reach a scale and then suddenly poof, you'll start making money. That's not how 99% of the businesses work. It is important for most businesses to make money from the get-go. And we'll come to that a little bit later, right? But again, coming back to the right questions, right? Leading questions are not good. So it's important to figure out, and these are typically the 5 questions I would recommend, right? For example, what is the hardest part about solving so much homework in a day? When did you last face this kind of a problem? Why was it hard to solve so much homework? How did you actually try to solve this homework? What did you hate about the process you put in place to solve your homework? What does this let me know? What is the hardest part about solving all this homework? Takes up too much time. When did you last encounter it? Yesterday. Why was that hard? I already spent so much time on school and I spent so much time on tuitions. And then after that, I have homework from school and from tuitions. It sucks. It's very tough. How did you try to solve it? I tried to get my mom to fill up a few of my journals and stuff. What did you hate about your solution? My mom, she started scolding me. You need to be independent. You need to do your own stuff. You need to grow up. Sucks. And my mom also has her own work and stuff to do. Okay. So that's where those are the answers. Now I can take insights from these and say, okay, the hardest part of X is not having time, which means you need to delegate it. When did you last encounter it? Yesterday. So that means this seems to be a frequent problem. Why was it hard? Again, it shows that it's a time problem. So probably delegation. How did you try to solve it? There are hacks, right? Like giving it to your mom. Now this allows you to, and what did you hate about your solution? Now this sends a benchmark, right? Like we mentioned earlier, I am building X for Y with problem Z, and this makes their life A% better. This allows me to measure that A%, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a number, but let's say the benchmark is they solve to try it using their, by getting their mom to complete a few journals, few diagrams, etc. And they hated it because their mom didn't have time. So now my solution does it in the same amount of time or lesser, and they don't have to trouble their mom or go through the hassle. So then this is an obvious improvement about above their hacky solution, right? So that is one. Those 5 questions give you a lot of insights. Of course, there are more questions like this you can ask, right? But this is as an example of what good questions could be. Tracking the right metrics, right? Now coming to the data part again, right? What are the right things you should be tracking when you grow your business, right? What is the thing that tells you my business is on the right track? Hmm? So let's say I've built the whole business and my studenthomework.com business. It's up, my website is ready, my solution is in fact in place where I have a minimum viable solution where 50, 100 students, I've given them access to my website, and they will be going onto the website and submitting the solutions, and I am able to take those solutions, pass it to somebody who can solve it, or solve it myself if required, and validate it and send it back to them, right? Let's say I've got that product ready. Now what tells me that my product is working as it's supposed to be, and that it is growing as it's supposed to be? Because your business needs to keep growing, right? Especially at the early stages. So the primary metric typically is the one you track, which represents delivery of value to the customer or to all the stakeholders that you might be involving. It shows that your value is recurring. It shows that that value is there instead of just potential, right? And so it is typically revenue or number of active users. What do you mean by it is recurring? What do you mean by there is value instead of potential? Here's the thing. Let's say my primary metric is revenue, which means what is revenue? कितना पैसा आ रहा है हाथ में? How much money are you earning? ठीक है? In simple manner. Now, let's say you're earning $10 or 10 rupees through my studenthomework.com platform. I'm earning 10 rupees right now this week. And then next week, I earn 50 rupees. The week after that, I earn 150 rupees. What does this show? One, that there is actual delivery of value to customer, because somebody will only have paid if I have actually given them the product, the service that is expected. Two, if of these 150, 200 rupees, whatever I gain a few weeks down, some of that is recurring, that that shows that people are coming back. If people are coming back, that means they like the product. Unless you like a product, you're not going to come again and again, right? So what this tells me, okay, out of the 15 that I had paying last week, 12 have come again this week, which is a good metric, which shows that this value comes again and again, over and over, right? And third is there is value instead of potential, right? It's just like how every mom says, oh, मेरे बेटे या बेटी में बहुत potential है, but थोड़ा और पढ़ाई करता तो. But the value comes actually from the marks, right? I mean, no, actually not. Your value is not related to the marks, of course not. Please don't take it that way. But just as a measure, right? Typically, marks would show your academic value as such, right? Doesn't necessarily show your value as a person. So please don't stress too much about marks. But anyway, so that's the idea. It's not just about saying, okay, oh, I have a potential of 100,000 customers, right? Like 1 lakh customer ho sakta hai. That's fine. But revenue says that I actually am converting that potential into value, right? It's the difference between potential energy and kinetic energy for whoever's studying science, right? You see velocity and you're like, oh, that thing's actually moving. It has energy. There is a ball hanging in the air. You're like, okay, it's hanging in the air, but I mean, do I know it has energy? Who knows, right? So that's the primary metric. So I, as a business, right, my studenthomework.com, I would keep tracking how my experiments are affecting my revenue post my initial validation where I've got people signing up, right? I will start trying to charge people. And the more I'm able to charge people, the better. So let's say after one experiment, I see that people have stopped paying me, then that means that experiment failed. It had a direct impact on the main metric I want to focus on, which is money in hand, right? Then I skip that. If I, on the other hand, run an experiment which increases my revenue, then that experiment probably has a correlation there, right? And that means that that's a successful experiment. The other primary metric is active users. Now, typically for all businesses, revenue, money in the hand is the metric you should track. ठीक है, मेरा आइडिया कितना पैसा बना रहा है. Like I said, active users comes only in those businesses which you actually can't make money without scaling. For example, social media. If you're building like the next Facebook or Google or what, that kind of stuff, which are driven on advertising, which is based on the scale you've reached, then you need to focus on active users as your primary metric. Basically, how many people use your product on a daily basis? What is the engagement you're having, right? But if you're somebody who's selling a product or a service, then you need to focus on revenue. A secondary metric would tell you the rest 20% of the story, right? You typically select 3 to 5 of these metrics, right? So there's retention, churn. This is all, a lot of jargon. But to give an example for my business, studenthomework.com, I would focus maybe on retention and churn, which tells me retention is basically how many people from my previous week did I retain this week. So like I said, मेरे last week 15 paying customer थे, उसमें से 12 ये week भी pay किए. That's good, right? That means I've lost 3 out of 15, which is 20%, which is 80% retention. So that 20% becomes my churn, which is how much I've lost, right? NPS is net promoter score. This allows you to figure कि भाई, are people actually liking my product or not? So if many a times when you're using certain products on softwares, it will ask you, how has your experience been? It'll be 5 smileys, sad, frown, to minimal sad frown, to okay, to smile, and to very good smile, right? That kind of, that allows, using that data, they calculate NPS, right? Which is what is the difference between the people who are very happy with the product and very sad with the product. So if you have like 60% of users are very happy with the product and 15% are very sad, then your net promoter score becomes 60 minus 15, which is 45, right? So I hope. So that's your net promoter score. So increasing that can be a good metric, because that shows that people are getting more and more people are happy with the product you're selling, right? So there's more like that. No need to get into that right now. So I think that's the end of my session. Uh, Thank you for joining us. Just to give an introduction to 100x VC, we are an early stage venture fund. Basically, what we do is we invest in startups. We work closely with them, and then we help them, kind of grow and scale their business. So that is what we do, and we invest through a unique document called the iSafe note, which is the India Simple Agreement for Future Equity. But you'll learn more about that when you talk to us, hopefully soon. Um, Again, so you can reach out to us. We have an email ID open to pitches from anybody. Pitch@100x.vc. So if you're a student building a product, feel free to reach out. Though caveat here, we do not invest in idea stage startups. We invest in a post-product startup where you build some of it. You don't need necessarily paying customers or traction, but kuch to build kiya ho, right? But again, age is no bar. So if you really want to talk to us, feel free to reach us at pitch@100x.vc, right? And these are our Twitter handles where you can follow. I'm done. Happy to answer any questions here.
Yes, yes. We'll take a few questions, Vatsal, but before that, I think the entire session is like, startup simplified. I think I wanted to rename this entire session when I'm, sharing with all the stakeholders of our student base. I wanted to, rename this entire session as startup simplified. Excellent. I mean, I'm very much, the entire session was so, engaging, and also you have actually understood the students perspective very well, especially the students, the teenagers very well, because you have actually mentioned the pointers where they're actually stuck at. You mentioned about MVP, you've been mentioning about what is traction and all. So once again, thank you so much, Vatsal. Before I take questions from the audience, I have one question here. So you just mentioned that age is no bar, but when a teenager approaches any investor here, how seriously do you guys take? I mean, how seriously do the investors take? For example, I think in the audience we have Manav Khaitan, one of our students, who has built an amazing product here. But if at all he is approaching an investors, what is the chance of taking him on a serious note and at least understanding his product? So this is one question that keeps floating for the past 6-7 months. The students have been asking. So yeah, what is your take on that?
Sure. Thanks, Pawan. So the way to think is, one, I'll just make a joke here. Again, disclaimer, this is a joke. Investors don't see anything but money. So don't care what sex, what gender, what age, where you come from, where you're going, no cares. Can you make us money? That's important to us. But to give a better answer to that, we only take you as seriously as you take yourself. So if you think, oh, I'm a student, I've got an idea, I don't know, I'm not serious about this, then we'll treat you like a student who's just trying to wanna be an entrepreneur, right? So I mean, the founder of our firm, Sanjay Mehta, through his family office, Mehta Ventures, he invested in Oyo Rooms when Ritesh Agarwal was just 17 years of age, 17 or 18. So very young lad. you still invest in them because he took his business seriously. He was serious about wanting to build it. He was serious about actually creating a business model. He was serious about putting his own skin in the game, actually getting traction before coming to investors, right? So while yes, we are always impressed when we look at young people and hear them coming up with these ideas and stuff, uh, it's about how seriously you take yourself and your idea, right? One of our we made 20 investments last year, in 2019 December. Our youngest founders were 21 years old or 22 years old, just right out of college, right? And so it doesn't matter that they don't have industry experience. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
They'd been working on that company 2-3 years before we saw them, and it was very impressive what they'd done. Data Sutram is the company's name. Um, and despite not all of them even being from a data background or a computer background, because the founders were good, they knew their shit, right? That's what we look for. They took themselves seriously, so we took them seriously. So it's up to you, um, as a student, to take yourself seriously first.
Wow, wow, that's an interesting answer, and thank you so much, Vatsal. Once again, we will take the questions that we have got. I'm just opening the questionnaire. Already, Manav is asking, what are your views on the relative advantages of equity financing versus debt financing for early stage startups, and how about fundraising through a convertible debt or a SAFE?
Sure. Um, that's a fairly advanced question. Thank you, Manav. I really appreciate the question. Equity versus debt. Um, there's no right way to fund your company. Every method of fundraising has their own benefits, and every type of company has a fit के इसमें कौन सा type of fundraising works. So venture, which is equity investing, right? Venture capital does not necessarily fit all business models. Let's say you want to open a manufacturing unit for iron and steel, right? That's not something that venture would be interested in. How venture works is you typically invest in companies which can scale very fast over a short period of time. And the relation between the money invested and the money returned is exponential, right? So J curve, I'm sure you must have heard of it or seen it, where it's like एक रुपया डाला तो 10 रुपया मिला, 10 डाला तो 10,000 मिला. Whereas iron and steel में it's typically एक रुपया डाला तो 10 रुपया मिला, 10 रुपया डाला तो 100 रुपया मिला, which is a linear relation, right? So venture के लिए those kinds of businesses meet. So you have to figure what works best for you as a business. Debt is a good option from banks. Typically, downsides with debt is banks would ask for collateral, personal guarantees. So that as an individual, especially so early in your career, getting riddled with debt can be very harmful, right? And we already know about students who when they're unable to pay their fees, they have to get very indebted, and then they're spending years to kind of pay it off, right? So debt works if you're able to create enough cash flow. Okay, income aate ja raha hai, कि I can within the time period start paying it off. Is it possible to pay it off? Then great. That is a good way to work. If it
Yes.
doesn't, then equity plays where, for example, Facebook, all these social media are excellent examples of companies that can only be built with equity, because Facebook didn't have revenues for almost 6-7 years. They didn't make any money, 5-6 years,
Yes.
whatever. So उतने टाइम में वो लोन का क्या करेंगे, right? कभी ना कभी तो इंटरेस्ट पे करना पड़ेगा, but they don't have the money to pay, right? So when they took up equity investments, they were able to skip that. One thing to remember is equity is the costliest way to pay for anything. Most businesses, your wealth as an entrepreneur will be created by owning equity, right? Because equity ka value scales exponentially typically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So wealth creation, which is different from just standard income or being rich, is through equity. So it's typically one of the costliest ways to pay for anything. So I hope that answers your question on debt versus equity. There's nuance to it basically. There's no better or worse. It depends on your business. And coming to convertible debt and iSafe note, iSafe is better, I believe. Convertible debt. So for those who would not know about this, there are shares in your company. Every share, every company. I'm assuming, I hope I'm not being condescending here. I'm just assuming that given your students, you may not have as much understanding, but if you do, I'm sorry. But just coming back, basically your company is split into a number of shares, right? Let's say it's like cutting a pie where you have multiple pieces, right? So let's say your company has 10,000 pieces. If somebody buys a piece of your cake at 5 rupees and there are 10,000 pieces, then your cake as a whole is worth 5 into 10,000, which is 50,000 rupees, right? So that is the value of the company. When you're raising it, you're selling pieces of your company. So you sell off 100 pieces, you get 500 rupees, right?
Yes.
There is the way CCD works, or convertible note, which Manav asks about, is
Yes.
basically it's debt or equity. So I'm not telling you, okay, you're just investing 500 rupees. I'm not telling you how many pieces I will give you. That will be decided at a later stage. But let's say at that later stage, I'm able to pay that 500 rupees back with interest as a loan. I pay it off as a loan. Or on the downside, if I can't pay it off as a loan, I can give you equity, right? So that is one part of, that's the CCD, which is where it is, I take an investment, it is either a loan or I've actually sold a piece of my company. iSafe is similar, where you say, okay, I'm taking the money, but I'm not deciding how many pieces of cake I will give you right now. We'll figure that out later. Right now, just give me the money. Dealings aage karenge. But I can't take it as a loan. So let's say, your company fails down the line. I can't come to you and say, Manav, give me back my 500 rupees with interest, right? I mean, you don't have the money anyway. Your company is dead. So how are you going to do it? But it's loan on your books, right? So it's tough. So that's where iSafe turns out to be better than CCD, convertible debt, in my opinion, at least. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So, by the way, so Manav is a 12th grade passed out student from
Okay.
Hyderabad, and he has got an admission in UC Berkeley.
Wow.
Manav also has interesting ideas, and is he's running a startup called Apoyo. Maybe Manav, you should write to Vatsal during your whenever it's possible, just write an email about your startup to Vatsal and gain his insights also. And we have Mahek, uh, again, our student from Metamorpho School of Entrepreneurship. She has asked, how do we validate our idea on a minimal level? If, for example, it's a standardized street food venture, which requires a good sum for implementation or validation. So if it's it is costing a lot of money to validate also, how do we validate that idea is what Mahek is trying to ask.
Let me just, so let's say it's a street food idea, right? You're thinking, well, logo ko pani puri khana hai, right? That's what I'm understanding. Well, here's the validation. People want to eat pani puri. That's something you can understand. What is to understand here is potentially. So let's take the example of something like Wow Momos or Box 8, right? Box 8, I'll take into example. Box 8 is one of the family office's investment, Sanjay's investment. What they do is basically they sell these fusion boxes. I don't know if any of you kids have had Box 8 before, but they sell these fusion boxes, right? Sab dal or bhat or sab ek mein mix karke kha lo kind of thing. They started off as Poncho, which was a Mexican food company. How did they validate? They built a store and they tried selling it. Just one location say. Their costs were low because initially they did not have to pay for rent. They cooked out of home, right? And they made it a digital first brand, right? They didn't want the product to have a restaurant feel to it. They're like घर पे ही deliver करना है सब kind of. So they built it out of home, and then they tried to sell it. And the more they sold, they realized, so people want to buy Mexican food. So we're going to try to expand. They raise money, blah, blah, blah. They expanded until they realized the market for Mexican is slow. It plateaus after a point because the demand isn't that high. Then that's where they pivoted to fusion boxes, right? So to answer your question, Mahek, the easiest way to validate these businesses is to start from home. So distribution, for example, food today is very simple. You don't even need to create your own marketing or anything. आज आप Swiggy पे या Zomato पे एक virtual restaurant खोल दो and just sell through home delivery, right? That is definitely doable. How you can validate is, first thing, make sure you know how to cook that. Then try to sell it maybe inside your building itself. Try to sell it on the neighboring buildings. How can you reach and try to actually gain people? Do people actually want pani puri ka home delivery? Try to sell 2-3 buildings. You might feel, oh, but I can't sell. That's part of entrepreneurship, right? Where you have to do sales yourself and marketing yourself and everything yourself. So you go, you knock on doors and say, madam, आज शाम में आपको 5 पानी पूरी 20 rupees के लिए दे सकती हूँ. Would you be interested? If they say yes, great. You go home, make that, give it off. Do it for one building. Are you able to increase your revenues? If yes, good. That means it's working. Your model's working. Then you scale it up little by little, right? You say, okay, so I'm able to sell to that building. Let me try another building. How many am I able to sell in that building? Now, every building will have a different demographic. Some buildings will have more of a middle class, demographic, where people living have a, weekly एक बार हम बाहर का खा सकते हैं. Some might have like higher end demographic where they might eat every day bahar ka, or so you use those data points then to learn more about who your demographic is. किसको बेच सकते हो. So if you, let's say, learn कि buildings where there are more kids tend to sell more, then that's an important point for you, which means कि you need to target the buildings where you have kids, and that way you can kind of scale it up, right? Pani puri ka ingredients aren't costly. You can cook yourself. Initially, you don't want human resources. Ghar pe karo sab, right? That is one of the luxury most of us have, where we have our own place, our parents to support us, and most resources at home. If you're building software or food, especially food ka to hota hi hai ghar pe, parents have this stuff, and software ke liye, all you need is a laptop and internet. So I hope that helps you out.
Yes, yes. And we will take one last question, and also all the other questions that we have. I'll just try to get insights from Vatsal and then post it back to you all. Okay. Sadhana has asked, how much profit do you think, sir, if I will make? How much profit do you think, sir, I will make if I am the first ones to solve the problem even I face? Have also done research on my idea, and there is none as such. Do you think I will have a lot of benefits? And if so, then how?
Sure.
The first
So
mover's
Sadhana,
advantage.
gotcha. So the first mover's advantage is not necessarily always an advantage. I always give the example of Google. When Google came out, most investors passed on them because search is already solved. It's not really a problem. There was Yahoo, there was Alta Vista, there was AOL, there were so many search engines. So many. Ask Jeeves, which is ask.com today. But, nobody solved it the way Google did, right? So despite there being so many first movers who were before, these guys just beat all of them because they had a much better product and a much better business model, right? Not saying that first movers advantage isn't there, but I wouldn't recommend being overconfident just because you're the first or somebody else hasn't done it, right? How much profit you can make, it depends on how you can build the business model, right? You have to be able to figure out this where you say, okay, let's say by selling my new product that nobody else has, I make 100 rupees, I sell this for 100 rupees. My cost of manufacturing this product is 50 rupees. My cost for acquiring those customers to reach out to them and to actually talk to them and convince them to sell is 20 rupees. And other random costs are 10 rupees. So that's 80 rupees. That are my costs. And I've sold it for 100 rupees. So that means I make a profit of 20 rupees, right? So that is one way you can work it out, right? If it's, let's say your cost of production, let's say it's software. So initially your cost of production, once it's done, you don't have any cost of production, right? So the more you sell, the more profit you make, rather than, having to kind of have only 20 rupees. The more you sell, the more your margin increases. So it depends on your product and your idea, right? But again, coming back to Sadhana, your question here, first mover advantage is valuable, but it doesn't allow you to be cocky, right? Where you can say, "Main to ho jayega bhai." That is one. And second is the unit economics of the business, which is how the pricing works, how much money you can make. You have to be able to figure it out. You have to be able to say, I can sell it at this much and I can make this much money off of it, right? That is not something I can help you with. The first mover doesn't affect your unit economics, right? The unit economics is the core of the business. And lastly, just reiterating on the first point I made during my presentation, ideas without execution are nothing, right? So you won't know anything about how much profit I can make or cannot make unless you actually try to execute your idea. So I hope that
Yeah.
helps you out, Sadhana.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Vatsal. So there are a few more questions, that have been popping up on, Facebook as well. I'll just take one question that has been there on the social media that we have been getting. What are the basic requirements or constraints for our idea to run a profitable business in present competitive market? Or, and also there is one question related to COVID-19 scenario. So how are you, what is 100x VC focusing on post COVID-19 scenario or during this COVID-19 scenario?
Sure. So I didn't get the first part of the question. Could you?
So first part is, what are the basic requirements or constraints for our idea to run a profitable business in the present competitive market? How do the value propositions is something that they're asking. And another part is on the COVID-19 situation. In the present situation, COVID-19, what are the potential business markets that you are looking at?
Sure. So the way I think about the current market scenario is, right, what sells will be whatever is, this actually is relevant to all times, is what sells is whatever is a painkiller rather than a vitamin, right?
Yes.
Painkiller is something you can't live without. Vitamin is
Yes.
something जो आज खाया कल नहीं खाया क्या फर्क पड़ता है. But painkiller,
Correct.
अरे मेरा सर दुख रहा है, I need to have that crocin right now, right? That's the
Yeah.
product we build. What we'll be seeing or are seeing right now is consumer behaviors changing. Now, that is where you have to understand the demographic you're also targeting. I would presume that majority of HNIs or upper middle class people would not see too much, if you're targeting consumers, that is, would not see too much effects on their consumption, because this doesn't affect them as poorly or as it might affect somebody else, right? But on the other hand, somebody who's middle class or lower middle class might have a lot of issues because of this. Now their spending power has decreased. Maybe pagar nahi aaya hai. Maybe they're just saving up for a rainy day. Maybe they have to pay for double rent, something, right? They lost their job, whatever. So their consumption patterns change. So the constraints here is understanding how this affects your customer. If it's a business, there are some businesses, I mean, if your customer is a business, there are some businesses that are doing really well in the current scenario, right? Parleji saw a huge increase in sales. It worked out because people started, rather than spending 10 rupees to make a roti, let me just take 5 rupees and Parle Ji ka packet khila do, and that's it, pet bhar gaya, whatever, right? So Parle Ji made a record amount of profits. Car industry shut down, no manufacturing, no sales, nothing. So now if you're selling to the car industry, then you're not going to be able to make money right now. If you're selling to the uh, Parle Ji company, then you're going to make able to make money. So important to remember is the while in the current scenario you would see that what is a painkiller, the definition changes and probably gets smaller for most demographics. If you're thinking of building a business, it has to be a long-term vision. Over 10-15 years, this is expectedly going to happen, this kind of thing, only once. So assumably there is going to be regression to the mean maybe in 1 year. Some consumers behaviors will definitely change for permanent, right? For example, there'll be much less uh, in-person meetings and much more webinars and stuff, right? Where that whole aspect goes away. So if you are building more something which is dependent on large gatherings of people, that's not happening another 2-3 years. Not that it's a bad business, but the timing's not correct. And timing does matter as well in a business, right? So I hope that clarifies for you what constraints to think about. Is to think about potentially how your demographics definition of painkiller changes and how it's going to evolve, because you need to time this correctly. But keeping a 10-year view, most products should still work out. Coming
Thank
to
you.
your, I
Corona,
think there was one more question.
one more question.
What
Yes,
our
on
thesis is?
COVID-19.
Yes.
Yes.
So we again we're investing along those lines, where some industries will be taking a pause on currently. We are actively investing though for class 2, but some industries we would currently avoid, where it over the next 3 to 6 months we don't see much changes happening. We'll be focusing more on the industries where we either see tailwinds or which are more all-weather businesses, right? Which can survive through such ups and downs.
Okay, interesting. So once again, thank you so much, Vatsal. There are a few more questions that are popping up, but I'm going to just write to you later, maybe during your free time. Maybe you can answer those, and then we can write it back to the students. And I think it was a wonderful session. This is the longest duration session that we have had. Continuously 1 hour 20 minutes. It was absolute fun for all of us, and a lot of insights that we have gained. And already a lot of students, they've been posting that the session is really good. They wanted the recorded session of this. They've been requesting for presentation. I don't know if at all we can share the presentation.
Happy to share. Yes.
Okay,
Happy
fine.
to share.
So then that would be really great. So I think, guys, so you will be getting the presentation also. Thanks to Vatsal once again. And all the this recorded session will anyways be there. You can access it anytime on our portals, and we will be sharing the recorded version. Once again, thanks so much, Vatsal. It's pleasure meeting you, and we have been we've been waiting for this kind of session. The students wanted this kind of insights from you. And Disha, if at all you can share the screen of our next week webisode. So next week also we have brought in interesting a speaker. We have got Ms. Dola Halder, who is the brand head for Doritos, which is a brand of PepsiCo. So Dola is going to talk about marketing, how she has started Doritos brand, what are the challenges that she has faced with the marketing, and how she is marketing during this COVID-19 time is something that she is going to share. The session is going to be there again the next Saturday, same time. So please do attend. And also, the phase 3 applications of our Metamorphosis School of Entrepreneurship has already begun, and we're going to close the applications by 20th. And from August 1st onwards, the sessions are going to begin. The credits will be starting from August 1st onwards. So you have about only 1 week of time, almost a weeks of time to apply for Metamorphosis School of Entrepreneurship, and submit your SOPs, and we will shortlist few of you guys. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe during this pandemic. Have a great weekend. See you soon on the next Saturday. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vatsal. Thank you.
Thanks, Pawan. And if anybody else would like to reach me, feel free to reach me at vatsal@100x.vc. That's my email ID. Happy to always help. Thanks,
Yes,
Pawan.
we will be sharing the email credentials of Vatsal also. Write an email. Feel free to
Sure.
write an email. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Bye.